What's up, everyone? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel, and it is time for my college football playoff projections heading into Week 12 of the 2022 college football season. Basically, how this video works, I give you the top 4 teams that I think played their best, this past weekend, and it's been kind of the same top 4, for a while. I mean, I don't think there's going to be really much changes here, to last week because every weekend, I have a pretty tough time, seeing who played the best. And I know TCU fans, are, asking, obviously to put them in here in the college football playoff projections, but I don't think they'll be in it. They need one more win in order for me to put them in here into the top 4 standings. But let's get right into it here with my college football playoff projections heading into Week 12 of the 2022 college football season. And here is the bracket. Number 1 versus number 4 seed will be held in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And then the number 2 versus number 3 seed will be in the Verbo Fiesta Bowl. So we'll start with the number 1 seed here. That number 1 seed is not going to change whatsoever. It's going to be the Georgia Bulldogs once again. I've had Georgia at number 1 for a while. And this Georgia team is starting to look like the team that, we expected them to be at the end of the season. This is a better team than it was in September. Obviously October a little bit. November is where they're just dominating everybody now. I mean, you look at the wins that they've had this year. Oregon was a big win. I mean, that was their biggest win of the year. South Carolina was also a big win. They're not ranked in the top 25, but, I mean, Georgia's got plenty of things to build on. I mean, Tennessee, they beat them a couple weeks ago, which was a big win for them by a couple touchdowns. And just last week, they looked like that most dangerous offense as well in the country, but maybe they're not the most dangerous offense. The defense, though, especially has been playing their best in these last couple of weeks. I mean, Mississippi State, they shut them down on the offensive side of the ball, and they shut Tennessee's offense down as well. So I think Georgia deserves to still be number 1. All right, the number 2 seed was a pretty tough one to call once again, but based off of the performance they had this past weekend, I had to go with Ohio State once again here at number 2. I know fans won't agree with that, but, this is still a good Ohio State team. I mean, they are pretty much a top offense as well in the country, but maybe not the top offense in the Big Ten or something like that, but maybe they're behind just Michigan. But, Ohio State, if they lose to Michigan next weekend, I could probably put them here out of the top 4. And I'm going to make a prediction on that game next week, and I'm going to really see who I think is the better offense, who is the better defense. I mean, if you look at both teams, they're pretty even on both sides of the ball, but defensively, I think it would go to Ohio State, but offensively for Michigan, the running game is strong. And speaking of Michigan, they're number 3 on here. Michigan was number 3 last week here on number 3. And if you go back to last week, I had Michigan defeating Ohio State in the Verbo Fiesta Bowl because I think Ohio State will beat Michigan, perhaps maybe against them in the regular season matchup, and then Michigan will get revenge on them. And, this is kind of similar to last week, but, I think Ohio State and Michigan both deserve to be in the playoff spot. Even if TCU loses the Big 12 championship, I think Michigan could still get in there as an 11-1 team. Maybe Ohio State can get in there as well, but, Clemson is probably on that list as well. But, there's going to be a lot to shake up here for the college football playoff rankings when the final rankings come out, at the end of the season, because we got a couple weeks left of the season, and week number 12 starts tomorrow. All right, the number 4 seed, just like last week, it's going to be Tennessee here at number 4. So same top 4 as last week. Georgia versus Tennessee in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, Ohio State versus Michigan in the Verbo Fiesta Bowl. And, these top 4 teams have really showed me that they are capable of going to the playoff at the end of the year. I know TCU is another playoff team, but they just need one more win. They just need one more win in order for me to put them in the top 4. But, I have TCU losing the Big 12 championship at the end of the year. And if Ohio State and Michigan, it comes down to that game. If TCU can make it to the top 4, I mean, it's going to come down to them as well in the last regular season game. Georgia and Tennessee already met, but I think Tennessee can win out and go 11-1. I mean, this is possibly the strongest, number 5 seed in the playoff bracket. And, Tennessee, I think, can win out. If TCU loses this Saturday, they're pretty much going to be in it, perhaps. And then also, if Michigan and Ohio State lose, I mean, Michigan obviously could still make it in if TCU loses the Big 12 championship. But, there's a lot of things to shake up in the playoff race. All right, let's make our predictions here. If these games were to happen this Saturday, Georgia versus Tennessee, we'll start with that one. It's going to be a lot of a closer game. Like I said, last week in my playoff projections, this will be a close one here. But another news there, Tennessee plays on the road at South Carolina tomorrow. That is going to be an interesting game there in the SEC East. I thought it was going to be some kind of an upset alert type game, but it was on my upset alert list, but it wasn't considered to be an upset. But Georgia versus Tennessee here, it's a high-scoring game this time, but at the end of the day, I think Georgia's defense is just too strong, and I'm going to go with the Bulldogs here to win in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. Now, Ohio State versus Michigan, rematch from the regular season matchup. Now, Ohio State, I had them losing to Michigan last week. The reason why is because I think Michigan's offense is just more talented than Ohio State's offense, but defensively, if you look at both of these teams, they're both pretty even, but pretty much, Ohio State and Michigan are two great, teams here on the offensive side of the ball. And they still have to play each other next weekend in the regular season. It's going to be a big-time game there if they stay undefeated, and it's going to come down to the Big Ten East Division. Now, last week I picked Michigan to defeat Ohio State. Like I said, it's going to be a high-scoring game. But just the way that Michigan's been playing this year, they've been really talented. I'm going to go with Michigan here, and I'm going to pick them for back-to-back weeks here to defeat Ohio State in the semifinal. I know it sounds crazy, but it's a neutral site game. Let's say if Ohio State defeats Michigan in the regular season, and then Michigan comes back here as a number 3 seed, maybe a number 4 seed perhaps, but let's say they come back here and play Ohio State on the neutral field, and they get revenge in that game. Tennessee could get revenge on Georgia in that game as well. So there's a lot of revenge games coming up, for these teams like TCU, whoever they play in the Big 12 championship. They're going to try to get revenge on that TCU team. All right, the national championship game, Georgia versus Michigan, the same thing as last week. Both of these teams are pretty even on both sides of the ball. Offensively, Michigan has a strong running game. I think Georgia can clearly stop that running game, but is Michigan going to have to pass the ball? Yes, they're going to have to pass the ball on this team, but Georgia's got pretty much everybody on that defense that can play, and I think Georgia, that's what's going to win this national championship game. I'm going to pick Georgia once again here to win back-to-back weeks here for the national championship if these games were to happen tomorrow. So it will be a lot closer, though. It will be a close game for Georgia here against Michigan, but at the end of the day, I think Georgia is just too talented of a team, and they got a, easy schedule ahead of them in the last 2 weeks. They'll play Kentucky tomorrow. That's on the road. It really shouldn't be a really big challenge, though, because Kentucky got beat by Vandy. And they also play Georgia Tech. So the schedule really sets up nicely for Georgia for the rest of the way. For Michigan, they'll play Illinois this weekend, and then they'll play Ohio State next weekend. So that's the schedule for some of these teams. Tennessee will play South Carolina, and then they'll play Vanderbilt last, and then Ohio State, of course, will play Maryland, and then they'll play, of course, Michigan at the end of the year. That's my college football playoff projections heading into Week 12 of the 2022 college football season. Let me guys know what you think about these projections, and stay tuned here for more on the Lucas Ross Sports Channel.